This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Northeast Ford and Elise Harney Real Estate. Hey Mary, how are you?
I am doing very well. How are you?
I'm excited to have my family friend Tara Sullivan come in today.
I read her bio. She is quite a tour de force.
Did she blow your socks off?
Well, let me just tell you the way she blew my socks off.
All right, go for it.
So she was Governor Spitzer's regional rep for the Hudson area. She was the executive director of the New York State, and get ready for this one, Quadricentennial. That's 400 years of New York history.
Which is a mouthful.
She is, or was, the chief operating and executive officer of the New York State Bridge Authority. And she also kind of coordinated the Skywalk project at the Rip Van Winkle Bridge, which bridged actually her love of art, history, and the bridge itself, linking the homes and studios of 19th century Hudson River School pioneers Thomas Cole and Frederick Church across the Rip Van Winkle Bridge. So she has had a history and a life of building bridges in metaphorical and literal senses. And yeah, should be an exciting one.
It will be. And I always love when you know people on a personal level, but like this podcast, Main Street Moxie podcast, allows me personally, this is my selfish reason, to get to know these people at a very different level and a different wavelength. And I love that. So I'm so excited to talk to Tara today.
Well, let's get started.
Elise Harney Real Estate is the #1 real estate agency for the tri-state region, and they provide a comprehensive overview of the regional market spanning Litchfield, Dutchess, Columbia, and Berkshire counties.
Elise Harney Real Estate serves 40 unique communities with 35 years of experience. They have a team of knowledgeable real estate professionals to work with you to buy or sell your house.
Their offices are located in Salisbury, Millerton, Norfolk, Falls Village, and Riverton, or you can visit them online at www.harneyrealestate.com. Tara, thank you so much for coming on the Moxie podcast.
Delighted to be here.
So we always start off, and I know our listeners are probably tired of hearing me say that by now, but we always start off by asking our guests to define Moxie.
Well, when we first talked about it, I looked it up, and I love the definition I came across, which is the spirit and force of character. And when I read that, I was like, oh, I have that. I definitely have force of character. I mean, people have called me a force, so it made sense.
It worked for you?
Yeah, totally
awesome.
Works.
Now, I think we could start with your upbringing and growing up in, you said you've come full circle with how you grew up and into your career. So can you tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up in an artist colony?
Sure. Woodstock was, before today's Woodstock. Right. Woodstock was colonized as the first art colony in the United States. It had been a farming community before that, and it goes back to 1902. Ralph Whitehead, Herbie White, Bolton Brown came to Woodstock to develop an art colony. Ralph Whitehead and Herbie White had a falling out, and Ralph Whitehead developed Birtcliff, Herbie White developed Maverick. The reason for that was because Ralph Whitehead was anti-Semitic. And Herbie White didn't like that and wanted to allow Jewish people in the colony. So he went to Maverick, where, composers and artists and, everybody, did their thing. And then up on Birtcliff, where we lived, and this is, of course, in 1960s, so much later, but artisans, craftspeople were up there. So it really was two art colonies in one area. Growing up there in the 1960s was incredibly unique. And I was the daughter of artists. So I was really embedded in the art community. We only hung out with artists. art students from the Art Students League every summer came to live with us. So we had real characters living under our own roof when I was little. So, and this is a piece of my Moxie, I believe that upbringing, that unique upbringing is what made me and other people in Woodstock unique, very open-minded, because we were surrounded by artistic, open-minded people.
Were you homeschooled?
No, I went to Woodstock Elementary School, and then I went on to our high school. One of the famous things on Birdcliff was, lots of very popular artists lived there. Bob Dylan was our next door neighbor.
Oh, wow.
We were surrounded by Antoine Réfugié and other great, great painters of that time. It was just so full of culture and art. We lived in a house called Eastover on Birdcliff that was backed by the Turno Opera. So the opera singers came every summer, and you would hear them rehearsing all summer long, arias wafting through the mountains. So it made for a unique upbringing and a vision of bohemian lifestyle, which, how many people get that? Very few.
Yeah.
Where you really see this unique, free spirit all around you.
Does it still exist?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So
I don't think so.
How do you go from that to politics and government?
Well, I used to be a little shy about saying I didn't leave my hometown until I was 40, which is true.
That's all right.
But before I left home at 40, I grew up there. I had been in and out of New York City, having jobs and college, but I ended up back in Woodstock, and I had a 2-year-old at the time, and we discovered asbestos in our water.
Oh, geez.
And that was a big deal,
yeah.
A carcinogen. And that was my political awakening, because I found that the town was very resistant about doing anything about the asbestos in our water. And I discovered not only a political awakening, but a fighter spirit. Now, I'd been an advocate for all kinds of things before that. I was a good fundraiser for different charities. But when I saw how local government was not taking the tiger by the tail and taking care of a carcinogen in their water, I just put my force to work, and I organized Asbestos-Free Woodstock. And with a lot of tenacity, we were able to get the town to replace the many, many, many miles of asbestos water pipe under our homes.
Wow.
So that we could drink decent water. But it was very difficult. There was one moment that I remember where I brought a jug of water to the health department hearing, and the health department officials were ready to say that there was no evidence that asbestos could hurt your digestive tract. Even though it could give you lung cancer if you inhaled it, it probably was okay to drink it.
Probably.
And I was the mother of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
I was fierce. And I brought the jug of water. I poured glasses of water for all the health officials. And I said, okay, you drink the water and I'm good. I'll go home.
It's like Erin Brockovich.
Yeah. And no one, of course, drank it.
Yeah.
So the, millions of dollars later, the town, well, end of story. Then I ran for town board.
From there.
And I won. And I ran again, and I won, and then I ran for county legislator, and I won. And that was my political beginning. And I should say, it was my political beginning, but it really led me to government. I now, after many, many years, decades, I see the difference between politics and government. I loved working in government. I became very disillusioned with politics, so I never ran for office again after those first 3 successful campaigns. But I did work for the Assembly in the legislative commissions for many years, mostly on interesting, related environmental legislation. And then I worked for Governor Spitzer as his regional representative for the Hudson Valley. And that led me to the Quadricentennial. The Quadricentennial was a celebration. Should I just keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. The Quadricentennial was a celebration of 400 years since New Amsterdam was basically colonized.
Right.
We should never bill it as that's when New York was discovered, because, of course, New York, as we see it today, had plenty of Lenape tribal nation people living here. But it was the first time that Henry Hudson came up the Hudson River and brought commerce with the tribal nations and colonized New Amsterdam, etc., etc. We celebrated that 400 years in 2009. It took me a couple of years to prepare, both in New York City, where we had a lot of celebrations, as well as celebrations all the way up the river to Albany, including River Day. That was really cool.
I remember that.
Where we did 8 days which is how long it took Henry Hudson to come from Manhattan to Albany with hundreds and hundreds of boats, flotilla, where everyone would, basically move together up the river. It was beautiful. The reason why the Quadricentennial resonated with me, it goes back to why history, especially our regional history, resonates with me. And that is, when the Dutch surrendered to the English without spilling blood, they made a bargain with the English that everyone would be able to practice whatever religion they wanted. And that was the trade-off.
Right.
Basically handing over the territory to the English as long as the English allowed freedom of religion. That's why New York City is the way it is today, is that moment in history that allowed people from all over the world who had been persecuted because of their religious beliefs came to the one place where it was safe. That's what began this great melting pot called New York City. It's also why all of that residual influence crept up through the Hudson Valley and made these incredible communities, including Woodstock, including all the communities we now know of the Hudson Valley, is that rich history. I was a kid growing up in Woodstock. I'm retired in the Hudson Valley. And then there's this professional life. And that professional life was all about helping people see this rich, beautiful history we have. Unique.
Yeah.
It's super unique. It's super beautiful and rich. And
I've got a couple of stereotype images in my head.
Okay.
Of growing up kind of a free spirit, maybe not, I'm going to stereotype, artists kind of just creating without a lot of structure. And maybe that's completely false. And then you are in these jobs that require intense amounts of coordination, of relationship building, of negotiating, of compromising, and of pushing things forward with creativity, but by, force of will. And where did that come from in you? Was that modeled for you as a child, or was it part of your personality?
I think that a piece of my personality, which is I'm what I would call a super independent thinker. And I question everything. There used to be a great bumper sticker, question everything, and I do. It's just the way my brain works. It's not anything I can't look in my background and find anybody who did that. I also can't look in my background and find anybody like me. I am very unique in my background. I mean, when I was a kid, I would just go out the door and go. You could just go, and I would wander for miles and miles and miles, a little kid. So, and I'm the mother of 2 daughters now. I can't imagine my daughters going out the door and being gone all day and then coming back.
Different times.
It's very different times. But it also comes from a piece of my personality that I think was innate. as far as, I think being a single mother was a piece of it. For my later professional tenacity and force, certainly growing up in a very independent thinking community.
Right.
And other than that, I can't explain it. I mean, I look back on myself, I look at myself, getting up every morning, going to anti-gun marches now. I don't go with a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. I go and meet a bunch of people.
Right.
But I don't know a whole bunch of people. I try to get my friends and everybody. No, nobody gets up at 6 a.m. on last Saturday to get down to the Brooklyn Bridge to protest against guns. I am a woman of action.
Right.
I always have been. I just get up and I get it done. And the things that I have done were really hard.
Yeah.
It's like the Quadricentennial was really hard.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was the regional rep for Governor Spitzer. So I looked out at all the things that were going on in the Hudson Valley. Mm-hmm. And the quad was not getting any attention. Mm-hmm. And it was like, what? It's like, where's the money? Where's the organization? Where's the projects? And nobody was doing it. And I went to the governor, not himself, but his people, and I said, somebody's got to do it. And that somebody is me. And they said, okay. And they gave me some money and they gave me, but really I had to invent it because no one was doing it. And in the end, the team that I put together, all women, we did this thing where we gave out 400 grants to communities throughout. Mm-hmm. 400 grants. We organized over 1,000 events in that 1 year.
Wow.
We did 3 major projects. We worked on Governor's Island to finish the perimeter mm-hmm. path around Governor's Island as the quadricentennial gift to New York City. We funded Walkway Over the Hudson as the quadricentennial gift to the Hudson Valley. And we funded Castle Point Lighthouse restoration as the quadricentennial gift to the North Country. So all of these giant projects and this was all done by the seat of our pants and women just getting it done. And it was great.
Yeah.
It was like, in some ways, it was like forcing the Valley, New York, and the whole Plattsburgh area, forcing people's eyes open to seeing their 400 years of incredible history. Mm. And it worked. We did it. And frankly, after I was done with that, I was like, I could do anything.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah.
So did you go from there to the Bridge Authority?
I did.
What was the trajectory of that? How did that come about?
Well, I had worked with the Bridge Authority on the Walkway project.
Yes.
And now, when I was the director of the Quadricentennial, I was pretty much given carte blanche from mm-hmm. the governor's office to work with all of the state agencies. And let me say, most state agencies are at least partially, if not in a big way, dysfunctional.
Okay.
And in myriad of ways. Mostly getting from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time. Mm-hmm. Getting funding put into a project is very difficult because there's just tons of red tape. Some of it really important and necessary for accountability reasons, and a lot of it just because of bureaucratic nonsense and junk. So getting all of those things done in a way that made sense mm-hmm. Was really difficult, except with the Bridge Authority.
Oh, interesting.
If I had to get them to help me with an event at Walkway to help open it, all of a sudden there were people there. They were ready to... It was just like...
Because they're good at building bridges.
Well, it's also because they were an independent authority. They weren't under the auspices of New York State. Even though they're called the New York State Bridge Authority, they, back then, were truly independent. And that was a good thing because it made them able to get things done in the timely way that they needed to get them done. And they did. If you don't mind, I'm going to segue into the history of the Bridge Authority for a second. And
Sure.
then, if you want to. The thing about the Bridge Authority is it was invented, again, a beautiful piece of our history, by Franklin Roosevelt when he was the governor, not the president. He needed a bridge built up by Catskill and Hudson. Well, it was the Depression. Where are you going to get money? Well, he said, we'll build it with a loan and we'll charge tolls and we'll pay back the loan. And it will be run by an independent authority separate from New York State so that they can have this money funnel that basically takes the money in and pays for the bridge.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. And that is the cool thing about the Bridge Authority is the Bridge Authority doesn't take in one dime of taxpayer money. Not one. Now, that's not the case with most other authorities.
Right.
But in your New York State Bridge Authority, that is the case. No tax dollars at all. No federal funds. No grants. Nothing. Completely supported by their tolls. And the reason is that structure way back when it was invented in the 1930s, I think 32, their basic mission was incorporated with their rules. And the rules only allow them to charge what they need.
Okay.
Okay, so how do you do that? You figure out, okay, I need to maintain these bridges. This is what it's going to cost. There's going to be some structural, repairs.
Right.
I got to pay people. That's X.
Right.
Divided by how many cars and trucks go over the bridge, that equals X.
Right.
So not only is it this perfect system, this perfect accountable system, it's also fair.
Yeah.
Because you're not paying an inflated price so that some other piece of government can skim off the top and use it for that. No, not with the Bridge Authority. You're paying for what you get. 5 perfectly maintained bridges, all incredible superstructures, and properly looked after and
So how do you keep the tolls stable without them fluctuating? If
they do fluctuate.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, and they have always. There have been times when, in the Bridge Authority history, when the toll was $2. I think it's just come up. It just had a increase. I think Easy Pass it's $1.75.
Yeah.
And I think cash is now $2. This is the first time it's been $2 since decades ago.
Yeah, I've never seen it at $2.
So it's gone down and it's gone up and it's gone down and it's gone up. It depends.
Right.
But that structure has been a piece of the beauty of the Bridge Authority. Now, sadly, it's called the New York State Bridge Authority. It should be called the Hudson Valley Bridge Authority because it's only the 5 mid-Hudson bridges. It's not the Tappan Zee, also known as the Mario Cuomo. It's not the Castleton Bridge. It's just our mid-Hudson 5 bridges. And the Bridge Authority also owns Walkway Over the Hudson, the structure, not the park on top.
In Poughkeepsie.
Which is a pedestrian bridge, unlike the Bridge Authority vehicle bridges. So anyway, I segued from the Quad to the Bridge Authority because when the new governor came in, Governor Cuomo, I basically was asked what kind of jobs I would like to do. And I said, I'd love to work for the Bridge Authority. And so I was appointed by Governor Cuomo to be the deputy in 2011. And then in 2019, I became the acting executive director. When I was the deputy, by the way, I was the first woman in any executive role at the Bridge Authority, or any kind of, and then when I became the acting, I was the first chief executive officer, female, of the Bridge Authority, which I'm incredibly proud of, because all of these organizations should be giving women equal consideration.
How was that to do? You're being the only woman in a boardroom of men.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
It was, I to this day, I remember the first time I walked into the boardroom of all male board members and all male staff members, and certainly executive. There were very few executives there, but basically the entire major staff, all the directors were male, and all the trustees of the board were male. And it was an interesting experience because when all men are together with all men, they behave a certain way.
Right.
And I didn't know that,
Oh.
because I had never been in that situation.
So you changed their dynamic.
I think I did.
Yeah.
And, certainly they watched more what they did in front of this single woman. And after a while, more and more women came to the Bridge Authority, so that also helped change it. But I also called them out on it, too, when they would joke or say things that were not okay. I would call them out every time.
Like sexism, just blatant sexism, or?
There was very little blatant sexism. Most of these men were conscientious. But yeah, there were times when there was blatant sexism. Most of it was politically incorrect jokes.
Okay.
A lot of that. And then there was also this banter that no longer exists there, but did exist. And I think it might have been, it could have, I'd like to think it was because it was all men, but it might have been because it was this historic way of being, and it just got stuck.
Right.
But we unstuck it.
I like that.
Yeah, we definitely got it unstuck.
Northeast Ford offers great sales and service, including a no-charge pickup and delivery for any service, even with oil changes. And they offer 2-year unlimited oil changes with any vehicle purchase, new or pre-owned.
Northeast Ford makes buying, selling, or trading in your car super easy. They have charging stations for your electric vehicle and a ready cash now offer and vehicle check on the spot if you wish to sell your vehicle. And they provide help with all the paperwork.
They service 6 counties, and they are located at 182 Route 44 in Millerton, where you can swing by and see Lan and his great sales team.
Or visit them online at www.northeastfordmillerton.com.
Mary looks deep in thought.
I am. I'm just trying to tease out. There's so much. I was very much taken with your determination to visit each bridge and understand how each bridge was working. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, were you trying to understand the dynamics of the people who ran it, the engineering components of the bridge? What were you after?
I became what I would call a student of the Bridge Authority, and the same thing happened to me during the Quadricentennial. I became a student of New York's history. I went and I sought out people like Russell Shorto, who had written the wonderful book about Manhattan Island. I think it's called Island at the Center of the Universe or something like that. So I think I just am a student of what I always have done. And when I got to the Bridge Authority, I wanted to understand everyone's role. I was in a position, a senior executive position. I wanted to be sure I knew what everyone was doing, how they did it, how it had been done before, how could we make it better, how could we do it for less money. So I got to know every bridge. I got to know every employee. I felt very, very strongly about safety and keeping everyone safe and healthy. So I became the safety officer when I was the deputy, and I took full EMT training so I could understand what kinds of injuries could happen and how we would have to deal with them. I just wanted to know everything there was to know. And it made me a unique boss.
I was just going to ask you about that, because that kind of curiosity and active listening and a willingness to expose your own lack of knowledge about something, to learn from others, I think is a very powerful, and it's almost, for those who are on the receiving end of it, it's empowering and unusual. Mm-hmm. To have someone come in and say, I want to know exactly what you do when you're doing this, and how can we help make you do your job better? Because I feel like sometimes people don't feel listened to. They have suggestions, but they don't feel empowered to act on them or bring them up.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it reminds me of one of the worst things about state government, and that is appointees often are appointed for political reasons. So a governor will have a friend who needs a job, and there's an opening and they put them there. Okay. And we all know this happens. The trouble with that is that person, if they're a good public servant, they're going to come in and they're going to learn. Mm-hmm. And they're going to learn from the people who work there. But many of them don't care about learning. They care about their prestige and their power and their falsity, if that's a word. And that happens a lot in government. I saw it all the time. That is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a responsible leader. I believe in leadership. I believe that to be a good leader, you have to really understand what everyone is up against so that you can help them make it safe, make it secure, make it meaningful, make it fulfilling to them. And I'll give you an example. There's an injury that can happen if you're working on a bridge and you fall. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're wearing a harness. And the harness holds you basically in a groin gripping, okay? So if you hang by that harness, let's say you fall, your harness catches you, now you're hanging. It's a matter of minutes before the pressure of that hanging can kill you.
Yikes.
And the term is suspension trauma. All right. Well, how would I know about that?
Right.
And who would teach me about that? So when I got my first harness and I climbed in and around a bridge for the first time, I asked the men that worked there about what happens when you fall, blah, blah, blah. And they began to tell me about this. Mm-hmm. Well, then we brought in, because I wanted everyone to really understand the different complexities of injuries that could happen at the Bridge Authority, I brought in the trauma center from St. Francis Hospital. And we had this big hearing, and it was full of, and this was when I was the deputy and my boss was asking questions. And I finally said, tell us about suspension trauma. And no one knew about it. Experts, the people who would actually respond to a suspension trauma on one of our bridges, knew nothing about suspension trauma. And the head of the St. Francis, this is going back quite a few years, I'm sure she's not there anymore, but she said, I have heard about it. Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about it. It was not part of our training. Okay, so that means we've got to be sure we know about it.
Right.
And we've got to go to people who can teach us. And we did that. We put together bridge engineers who knew about suspension trauma, and we developed a protocol for what to do. Mm-hmm. Because when you lower someone down, you don't want to put their head down. You want to make sure they're sitting up. There's a whole protocol to, A, quickly get them down, and B, treat them in a certain way, not prone, that will help them survive from hanging, not from their actual injury. Okay? So you see what I mean? It's like no one would have known in my level.
Right.
You know, the rank and file knew.
Right.
They had been trained by each other.
Right.
And by osmosis. And But none of the higher ups knew, and even the trauma center nearby that would have responded to these accidents, very rare, knew about it. So you see what I mean? It's knowledge is power, and life and death. So that's part of why I was always learning.
But I think there's a certain, whether it's part of your personality or you learned it along the way, this beginner's mindset and curiosity, basic curiosity and empathy are what make people loyal and inspire them to do their best work when they feel valued as human beings. And it sounds like that was part of your leadership skill set.
And style, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that, I retired a little less than a year ago. And when I was retiring, I looked around at the 156 people I worked with and felt like we were a unit.
Yeah.
We weren't a leader and rank and file. We were a unit. And I am sure that everyone that worked at the Bridge Authority agreed that I was a team member, and they could come and teach me, they could come in and tell me, and I could teach them too. I mean, there were many things I knew from my own history.
Right.
I was older than most of them, so I had life experience that I could share. So we were absolutely a unit.
Was that a different leadership style than the men in the room? When you talk about sitting around the table, was that different from what was being modeled around you?
Definitely. And I think it was different throughout the Bridge Authority's history. I think, it'd be interesting to ask someone who had been there a long time. I mean, I know plenty of people that were there for decades and decades. I mean, some people were there for 40 years. I'm sure that they would say it was top down. And they were always like, incoming, here comes a new executive director from Albany. And then they would have to get used to that person. Gratefully and luckily, my successor is a woman. She is an engineer. She has background with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And so she's like perfectly made for what she's doing right now. And I don't know what her leadership style is, but she certainly came with the right credentials, and the fact that it's a woman just makes me really happy and proud.
Yeah.
So in your time there, did you change kind of the fabric of that boardroom and staff members there?
I think so. One of my guides, you know how we really respect and go back to, somebody who said something. So Brian Stevenson, who is, a very famous advocate for people who have been lynched throughout our American history, incredible writer, incredible attorney. He was the commencement speaker at my daughter's graduation from Bard 8 years ago. And when he was speaking, he looked out at the audience and he said, the most important thing you can do is speak up and speak out against injustice or anything that's wrong. You can't, if you're just sitting there, you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. I'm paraphrasing. He said it much more eloquently than I. And that is a credo that I realize now I've always lived by. But he sort of materialized it in my consciousness so that if anyone made a joke, an improper joke of any kind, I called them on it. And that's really an uncomfortable place to be in a lot of the time, especially if everyone's laughing, especially if everyone is more, has a superior position to you. So it takes courage,
Moxie,
to speak up. And, I would tell women in particular, but all people, you got to do it every time.
Right.
Not just when it's easy. You got to do it really when it's hard. And it is hard to do that.
So how do you do it in a way that's not a gotcha, but with the right intention of just educating that, hey, that makes people uncomfortable, it makes me uncomfortable. How do you do that without just being like, oh, there she is again, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to do it in a way that doesn't come across as a gotcha, but that's more intentional. Like, I just want to educate you about the power of the words you just used.
Yeah. Usually I would do it in private.
Okay, so it wasn't like in front of the whole group.
I don't believe in hurting.
Shaming people.
Shaming people. Although, I mean, there were times when it was appropriate.
Right.
If once someone was making fun of someone with a lisp, and that was not okay.
Right.
And I had to cut it off in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
But another time, a man was talking over me and other women, and I took him aside and I said, explained it to him. I said, this is what you do. This is how often you do it. You do it with me. You do it with others. And he looked at me just like aghast. And he said, no one has ever told me that. And I said, that's because no one ever was in the position to tell you that. And he changed his behavior from then on, not just around me, but others. So it was learned, I don't know. It was habit, I don't know. Whatever it was. Once he became conscious of it, he corrected it.
Right.
And did he believe that he was wrong? I don't know. But he definitely changed his behavior.
I think that's a really important skill because people are the product of paradigms and upbringings and settings that we know nothing about. And it's not about making them look small. It's about elevating everybody through knowledge and through awareness. So the fact that he changed, I mean, there must have been something in him to take that on board.
That's right.
But it was there must have been something in the way you said it, the intention you brought. You weren't doing the finger wag. You were just trying to educate.
Yeah.
The power of what he was doing and how it took away from him, from what the team was able to accomplish, from how others felt. And I think it's such an important part of leadership. I don't know that everyone has that. Hopefully we're educating people right now.
Yeah.
So I think that makes you more credible. When people feel like they're being corrected to make them better, not just to take them out at the kneecaps or reprimand, although sometimes that's appropriate, I imagine.
Yeah.
The straight up reprimand. I want to switch to the Hudson River Skywalk.
Yeah. So glad you're asking me about that.
Yeah, so this is where I feel like this upbringing keeps coming back. Like your appreciation of art and the history of this area allowed you to do something that in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
That was really significant. Can you talk about it a little?
Sure. So, background. Frederick Church, Thomas Cole. Thomas Cole was basically the founder of the Hudson River School of Painters. Really, the dawn of American art. American art is idiosyncratically and deeply different than art in any other country, just like, other countries can boast about their idiosyncrasies and characteristics. So here, Thomas Cole was developing the Hudson River School of Painters and a certain kind of painting, very atmospheric, incredible landscapes. His student, Frederick Church, came to the Hudson Valley, followed basically his teacher to the Hudson Valley, and built Owana. So here, right across the river, right across one of our bridges, you have the student and the teacher. You have these incredible artists, American artists, that have both their homes there, but it had never actually been connected. And so we developed a partnership with the Thomas Cole House, the Olana partnership. We also worked with the 2 counties, the 2 towns, the electeds, all that. We brought everybody together and we put together the Skywalk project. Well, luckily, Governor Cuomo loved the project and gave us some money, and we were able to do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's not done yet. It's 2/3 of the way done, or 3/4 of the way done. There are a few more things that have to be done. But for now, it's perfect. It's a 5-mile walk round trip, and you get to see what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
When you cross the river between the 2 homes, you see those landscapes that are in their paintings, the very, very landscapes. You get to see that inspiration with those sunsets to the west over the Catskills and the grandeur of the Hudson River and all that we're surrounded by. And so putting that project together was a little bit like the quad, and Walkway Over the Hudson. So I had a lot of experience with putting together a project with a community. So that piece of it was my nature by then, to really work at collaboration and put the project together. And then to get the project done, and get it done quick so that people can enjoy it. And now in retirement, I serve on the Thomas Cole board, which I love because I don't know, again, it's like, I think I wrote you about how it's full circle for me. So I grew up in the first art colony on Bird Cliff in Woodstock, and now I am doing board of directors work with the Thomas Cole House, Thomas Cole, who was the originator of the Hudson River School of Painters. It just feels like I'm home doing what I love and care about. That isn't to say that my passion for making the world a better place, and God knows the world really needs all of us pitching in big time. But I get to really experience my own creative love for this valley and its deep, rich history.
Well, we have come full circle in this podcast
Oh,
conversation.
good. Very good.
And we like to finish up with Thorin.
Well, I had one other question.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite bridge of the 5?
Oh, good question.
Because if for those who don't know,
That's like a mother saying which is her favorite child.
Well, I used to say
Yeah.
I love them all equally.
Right.
Yeah.
But can we name them? It's obviously the Newburgh Bridge.
Well, let's start more south.
Okay.
The Bear Mountain Bridge.
Bear Mountain
the
Bridge.
oldest bridge, which will turn 100 in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very special bridge.
Yes.
If you haven't been there, you got to go. And at the bridge, there's a bridge museum, a little bridge museum. You have to make an appointment to go there, but it's so incredible. So there's that. Then there's the Newburgh, the big granddaddy bridge, the bridge that supports all the other bridges financially.
Oh, okay.
Which is a big double interstate
It's
bridge.
a big one.
It's a big one. Then there's the Mid-Hudson Bridge. Again, unique, beautiful, very historic. Eleanor Roosevelt cut the ribbon to open it.
That's the Poughkeepsie one.
Yeah. The Kingston-Rhinecliff Bridge, incredible because it doesn't have any steel over the roadway, so you have a clear view of that incredible view going east or west.
So beautiful.
And then the Rip Van Winkle, which is Skywalk and connects the artists' homes. So I have to tell you, I don't have a favorite. I really don't. I love them because they're all very unique historically.
I love how you romanticize them in a way.
I do. I totally
They really
do.
are like people to you.
They are. They're very unique. Each one is very special. Not like each other.
Right.
What was the question I was supposed to ask?
Well, the wrap-up question.
Oh.
I'm blanking now. I'm having a
If
moment.
you had some advice.
Sorry.
Do you want to take over?
So if you had some advice, some Moxie advice for our listeners, what would it be?
I think it's, my mantra, speak up, take action, do the right thing every time.
That's something I think all parents also say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think we...
And build bridges.
And build bridges, metaphorically, yes.
Tara, this has been so fun, and I learned so much and things I had forgotten too about the history of the Hudson Valley. And so for me personally, it's been an honor to have you here and to learn and relearn some things and be excited for some big things coming up, like the 100th for the Bear Mountain Bridge. So I hope our listeners enjoyed it, and we really appreciate it.
Well, I love being here with you two, also 2 women with Moxie.
Aw,
That's nice.
that is nice.
Mary, there was so much today to talk with Tara.
Oh my gosh. I just can't believe all that she has accomplished.
Artistry, leadership, bridge authority, dealing with all these government agencies, her kind-heartedness, her, just work ethic, working with everyone, as a team, and she, instead of the trickle-down effect in a top-to-bottom leadership, just her approach to everything, I was just blown away.
Yeah. What did you think of her leadership skills or her theory of leadership?
Well, your question to her about how she went to every bridge and tried to meet with every, coworker, not employee, but a coworker, to understand their job and how she could help them, how she could make it better. I think that right there says so much about her leadership and her approach to it, and that they are a team.
Yeah, that was, you read books on leadership,
yeah.
and she's kind of textbook in how to do it effectively.
Right.
I also was impressed as someone who falls into a panic planning a birthday party. That quadricentennial organization, I can't even visualize it.
What'd you say? There were 1,000 events over a year that they planned? Or am I forgetting the number? But it was a lot.
It was a lot. And a lot of different constituencies and just geographically pulling it all together. So that was impressive. And also how she grew up in this creative environment of artistic excellence and then exemplified creativity in her own way.
I think it's just, I think we touched on it with her, and we certainly talked to her about it after, with the fact that after the interview, but how will you go from very artistic, free thinking, hippie-ish even at the time, in the 60s, to a very corporate job. You don't think that those two correlate, but for her they did, and she's come full circle with it too, and she draws the parallel with that and the trajectory of her life, both personal and in her job. It's quite something.
It is, and I think growing up with artists, it just seems like, from what she said, she was able to see things that others couldn't see and connect things that maybe didn't seem obvious. And I feel like that's so much of what artists do, is they see the world in a different way, and they're curious about the world either visually or musically. And I think she took those skills with her when she left Woodstock, and now she's, like she said, she's come full circle.
I forgot to ask her, but one impression that I took from that, artists usually are unafraid, and they're confident in their artistry and what they do, right? So they have the moxie for that. So I think, even though she says she isn't an artist per se, but I think perhaps maybe she took that into her life, and the confidence to, want to think differently, to be different, that's okay. And artists certainly are fearless when it comes to that. So perhaps, that's her greatest takeaway. I don't know. That's my thought.
It could be. And
we're just theorizing here.
Well, it's what we do. But she was super interesting and I think really personable and willing to learn. I mean, she's a lifelong learner to me. Even though she's retired from this capacity, I don't think she's done yet.
Oh, no. I love it. I mean, you and I are lifelong learners, so we connect with those people, and it's just, you have to keep learning. And I loved her approach to that and what she had to say about it. So, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Tara and hearing her story and being inspired, because I was inspired.
Yes, and we'll have information and links about Tara in our show notes for Main Street Moxie.
All right, Mary. See you next time. This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Northeast Ford and Elise Harney Real Estate.